Yes, not bad.
You did it, Kirk.
It's only 1:31, so it only took a minute. I did a Instagram live with, this is my first time ever hosting, and maybe the last time, but I did it with a lady from Australia, and I was trying to go through my computer, and then like 20 minutes. So, well, I'm glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. And dude, I think you're great with technology. You run a podcast. You're here on Instagram. You do these amazing nature, like walk and chats and post. I think you're actually great with technology. You made this happen. So
Okay.
good to be here.
I'm like, for those of you who don't know, I'm basically like your kids. I'm kind of a little bit of a jerk. But thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. So Wendy, whoa.
Whoa, don't fall.
So, I'm a little bit more informal. I know kind of what history is, but we're very much aligned in how we do things. But you're obviously a mom, a woman, and you come at it in different ways than I do, because my story was I was the freak dad, right? That was out of control. It's kind of your story of how you got to this place and sharing that.
Well, yeah, Kirk, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I just admire the work you do so much, and I thought it'd be fun. It will be fun today for our communities to meet one another, right? Like for us to meet the calm parenting community, and for you guys to meet the Fresh Start family community, because we do have so much in common. And yeah, so I'm Wendy Snyder, everyone. Hello, positive parenting educator and family life coach. And like Kirk, I have a heart for helping families who have the honor and the blessing of raising a strong-willed child, which, holy smokes, it feels like by the time we get them to be 18, and I'm close, Kirk, but I'm not where you are yet. You've graduated one into adulthood, but it feels like we earn some special master's degree.
Got your way of saying that I'm a lot older than you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe mine's almost 16. So my story is I found this world of doing parenting differently when my daughter was 3. She's now 16, and she is just as strong-willed now, thank God, as she was when she came into this world. But those first few years were really rocky, like really right when she hit the toddler phase for a few years. When I decided to leave my career and stay home full-time with her, it just really got nasty. She was in timeouts 50 times a day. We were trying things like spanking, because everyone and their mother said that's just all you got to do, scare this kid and they'll just fall right into place. And it just couldn't be farther from the truth. This little girl, once I learned all these tools and things that you and I now teach, Kirk, everything changed once we started to prioritize connection over correction. Once we started to realize how much her little soul needed to be empowered, or otherwise she was just going to get it in unhealthy ways that need to feel powerful. And after a few years of learning these tools and being entrenched in this work, I decided to become an educator. And now I run Fresh Start Family and host the Fresh Start Family Show, which you were on episode 155, Kirk, when we talked about how to de-escalate situations with strong-willed kids when they get wild. So yeah, that was a good episode, and it was just so fun to get to know you back then. I'm happy we're connecting again now, and it's just an honor to be here and to be doing this work alongside of you and pouring into these parents, because it's just, when you're blessed with one of these amazing human beings, which I like to refer to as the next generation of leaders, it's just really not something you can do it alone, but man, it's just a whole different journey when you have a community or mentors to cheer you on and empower you to do things differently than what may have been done to you, or is taught in your faith circle or your extended family circle. It's just a game changer.
You mean like the judgmental circle that surrounds us, right? Of like, you just need to discipline that child. And then, with our discipline means to teach, right? And so, like, just sending them to their room and punishing isn't really teaching. I was going to ask, so when you had this, when your daughter was 3 and you started to make this shift in thinking, what was the hardest part in? Did you second guess yourself for a while? right? Like, is this really going to work? And go through that if you don't mind, if you can remember back to the days.
Yeah. I love that question. And this is going to be a funny answer. Yes. Yes, I love this, Kirk. So it's funny. I've been thinking about this lately because I've been doing this work for now 13 years, and there was probably a solid 5 years where I still doubted, like, is this really gonna work? Right? Like, it was a bit of an experiment, right? Like, everybody and their uncle just tells you, like, no, you need to, like, overpower them more. Essentially, they don't use that language, right? But it's like more hitting, scaring, like they need to submit, instant obedience, all that kind of stuff. They need more. And we were experimenting with, like, no, actually, we're going to empower, we're going to focus on relationship, we're going to do compassionate discipline. So for years, I remember thinking, like, there were times when I would get triggered and then I would fly off the handle, which I did for many, many years before I learned, like, how to not fly off the handle consistently. And in those moments when I was so triggered, I would ask myself, like, am I drinking some type of Kool-Aid? And so now my daughter is actually in her English class. They've been, like, studying historical, like they have to choose a subject. And one of them was, like, the fascination of cults, right? And it was like, oh my, I remember having the thought of, like, have I drank in some Kool-Aid that is, like, just not gonna work? Like, we hear everyone saying, like, just hit her, that's gonna work, right? And I would have those moments where, I would cry and I would say, Terry, what are we doing? This kid, she's out of control. Like, is she even learning? And then I would go to bed and I would wake up and I would just be like, everything is fine. What we are doing is in line with our values. It is going to work. And I especially would just get right back in touch with my vision and what I believed in and the psychology and knowing. And that was, like, more the beginning. And then as the years progressed, it was just confirmation after confirmation. And now we sit in this place where we get to say confidently, right? Because we went through all those years of, like, oh, now we're in third grade, now we're in fourth grade. But now we get to say, holy smokes, not only does it, air quotes, work, but there was no Kool-Aid being drank. There was just courage. There was courage to do things differently. And now we get to see the same, like, successes getting replicated in our community by the thousands every year. So, but there was lots of self-doubt. And I could just hear my mom's voice, like, Wendy, why don't you just hit her a few times before I found this work? But it just was a lot of that voice of, like, you're doing it wrong. This is not going to work.
I like that. I like the word courage, because that's right. And you have to, so with us, it's the courage, and then also taking the long-term view, right? Of, yeah, I'm not raising this kid. For me, look, the strong-willed kids to me aren't really good at childhood, right? They're not good at, they're not. But if you give them, like, a grown-up job, they're amazing. And so what I find myself, especially as I get older, because I've got some old guy wisdom of saying, like, no, that doesn't matter. What you're doing, most of that stuff that you're doing and worrying about doesn't matter, because I'm not raising my child to be a child. I'm raising them to be an adult. And these kids are just, I mean, I bet everybody listening to this, your kids are horrible for you and amazing for other people, right? The neighbors are like, we love your daughter. And you were like, seriously, can she live with you for a little while? Pick her back up when she's 16. But that's one of those dynamics. One of the hardest questions, and I know we should probably save this, but I just like jumping into it. That balance between going too far, where you're too soft and you're kind of giving in and doing that, and then, so for us, it's the extremes of, sweetie, I talk to you like this, kind of too soft. And then there's my approach, my former approach was, you're going to do this right now, fear and intimidation. How did you find that balance? And I think this is important for a lot of parents, that balance of having the connection, being firm, but not being harsh, but not being too soft either. Because a strong-willed child, right, when I always joke with this, like a mommy will do this with her little child of, like, mommy needs some help. And then the 3-year-old's like, yeah, well, mommy might want to find someone who's going to help, right? Like adults, and they have that tone. So that balance, how did you find that? And any words of wisdom for parents who are struggling with, like, am I being too soft? How does all that work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's interesting because in my work in my community, I'd say like 90% of the time we're working on how do we get out of that pendulum swing. Let's just call it to the right, where it's like too firm, like autocratic, my way or the highway, the fear and force is coming in, the look, the intimidation, like we spend a lot of time there. And then we also spend, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 80-20% of the time we're spending like on those times when we realize, oh, we're dipping into permissiveness. Like
Right.
this feels like, which we know, like it actually it deteriorates a relationship between two people. Respect actually gets lost. Like all these things, it's not effective, right? And it also makes you feel disempowered and puts you often into like a victim mindset, right? So yeah, the goal of finding that firm and kind middle, which is what we call it, firm, kind, middle.
I like that.
Yeah, and there's like firm kindness that I like to teach and practice just on a day-to-day basis. And then there's like a little recipe that we do, which is like firm kind authority, which is like a little bit more intense, which is when someone may get hurt or, like, because I know that's a lot of people are just always like, but what do you do when they're about to touch the stove or run into the street? So firm kind authority is like a little recipe we do that is just, it's just a lot more stern. And then the firm kind middle ground is just something we practice on a day-to-day basis. That's another little recipe that we do that's like, that again is just very direct and it involves connection. So it's like lots of agreements. We're doing lots of agreements. We're letting our kids know, here's why we're so firm on these rules. And really a lot of, I bet maybe you're similar, Kirk, where people think from the outside that this work is permissive, but actually when you hang out with families who get entrenched in this work and really care, really like give a damn, I like to say,
Right.
They actually usually are holding the stronger boundaries than the rest of the world. So we spend time mentoring our families how to have very strong boundaries and rules that often make you the black sheep, right? Like you're very different than your community because you are holding so strong to boundaries, but you're doing it with connection and firm kindness. So you're following through, which is like the opposite of permissiveness. You're following through. Bedtime is at 8, no phones in the bedroom or whatever your rule is in your house that you're sticking to. But there's connection too. There's empathy. There's like, hey, I get it. No wonder you want to stay up late, right? Like, no wonder you want to watch that show. No wonder you want an iPhone when you're in the 5th grade. Like, that makes sense. You're not crazy. Like, so we do a lot of empathy and connection in when we're like executing firm kindness. And then empowerment too, like involving our kids in the process to have them remember, like, what was that agreement? Remember that family meeting or when we discussed why we need you home by dark on your e-bike or whatever, like making sure they understand, which you and I know, Kirk, with strong-willed kids, like if they don't see the value, if we haven't like communicated to them well why a rule and a boundary is good for them as well as the family, we often will lose them, right? So it's like getting away from that, like, well, it's because I freaking said so. Because I said so. You do it or else, like as soon as you bring in threats, overpowering these kids, you might mean it for a little bit when they're little through the fear and force, but as soon as they get into those tween teen years, you often lose them if that's your method. So it's firm kindness. It's the middle ground between too permissive or permissive at all and too intense, which is what we call autocratic. And that is a journey to get there, to be firm and kind.
I love that. I think in our language, like the first thing you did of like, of course you want to do that. Like we would say that is normalizing. This is normalizing. Oh. You're not a bad kid. Of course you want, like, why, like, I like this little thing of like, of course, I like that language, by the way. Of course you want to do that. Yeah. And I try to flip it around and say, it would be weird if your kids didn't push the limits, right? Like, it would be weird if your kids said, of course, Mom, I've had enough time on screens. I know they're not good for me, so I'm going to do exactly, like, that would be odd. I'd be like, you're up to something.
Yeah.
So your thing there of normalizing it rather than adding shame to it, like, why do you always ask for more? Because that's human nature, right? And we're Americans. That's what we do, right? There's a little bit of, but you're normalizing it, and then you're moving to problem solving, right? Of like, hey, look, this you're going to do, that's not working. And that's also that tone you're doing, which is, it's not the over explaining for the strong-willed child, because that tends to make them angry, right? When I talk too much and I'm trying to explain and get you to, they tend not to respect that. But when you were just modeling that, even like, of course you want to do that. No, look, you know the rule's not going to happen. So what could we do? And then in our language, that would be called giving them ownership of their choices, but within your boundaries as the parent, right? And you know this, and I'd like you to speak to this of, you know, the strong-willed child is always going to push. And the more you push, the more they resist, and you kind of have to lead them, you have to draw them. And I don't want to say, you know what, you're difficult, just do whatever you want. It's no, here's what I expect. And my formulation is, I don't care how to get it done. If you want to do it in a weird way, if you want to do your homework upside down, laying out in the snow, I don't care. Just get it done. And I give them some ownership over how they do it, but it's still always within my boundaries. And I'll be quiet and let you talk. But with a strong-willed child, I just make my boundaries a little bigger, because, you know, when you first started with your daughter, everybody said, you better clamp down on that child. And they may as well just said, you know what you need to do? You need to clamp down, which will force her to fight anymore, and then you'll have a bad relationship with her, and she'll, right? That's because that's what happens. But so that part of it, of establishing those boundaries, and that, you know, maybe that instinct, it doesn't have to be about your daughter, but that insight into what strong-willed kids respond best to.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun, Kirk, to hear your language versus my language, right? And like, I'm going to borrow some of yours, right? I love the ownership thing, because it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing. We call it empowerment, because these strong-willed kids, and I get a lot of it in me. So I love that, because I'm constantly like, oh, there it is in my body. Like the desire to feel powerful. And as an Enneagram 2 wing 3, I of course have to watch out for my pride, right? Like it's a balance, right? Like all this is a science, it's a journey, but I know that I have a strong desire to feel powerful. It's why I'm an entrepreneur. It's why I'm able to teach and lead, like all the things. And so with my daughter, I can just see it so clearly that she has such a strong desire to feel powerful. And so it's like knowing that that's what's underneath of it. So if I can, you know, give her opportunities, as you say, ownership of her choices, but stay firm with the limits, then she will feel empowered. And so we focus so much on like, what are the basic human needs? Like God designed us in this amazing way, but we all are the same. We all have the desire to feel powerful. Strong-willed kids, it's like up here. We all have the desire to belong, which is why it's so important we take the shame out, because that's the whole, like, you make sense to me. You're not an alien. I get you. Of course you want to do this. There's nothing wrong with you. You're a great kid. And we're not going to have phones till high school, whatever it may be. But the need to feel powerful, the need to belong, the need to feel unconditionally loved. Like these are all basic human needs. The need to feel valuable. And so when we are like leaning into actually like teaching our kids how to be healthy leaders, we're teaching them how to lead their own life within the fences, right? Within the boundaries. We're teaching them how to get their power needs met, because we know that they have such a strong desire to feel powerful. And if we don't help them get that need met in a healthy way, day to day, in the house, outside of the house, they will get that need met. And so I can relate to these kids, because like I always laugh at myself when I'm in the car, if I'm in the passenger seat and there's traffic or something like that, I can feel myself coming out of my skin as my husband like tries to navigate. And I'm like, I would go right. Like my everything in me wants to be like, wants to lead, wants to say, we should go right up here and then we'll cut through and we'll take a left and that'll get us to the freeway the fastest. And I'm just always like watching myself and just thinking like, oh, that's what they feel. They feel in those moments like they really often are, even though many of them struggle with shame because of just is, you know, they are confident. They believe in, like they want to feel empowered, they want to lead. And so that's where I think the more we can trust that doing that is creating healthy humans that are not entitled, or giving them more power is not like creating these maniacs. It's actually like what I find is that the more power like you can give them in a healthy way, the less they'll like inside your home and in your family, the less they'll demand it out in the world, or the less they'll get it met in an unhealthy way. And now that I've got a teenager, I've got two now, but my oldest one especially, I can just see these kids out in the world. They are getting that power need met in very unhealthy ways. And at home, they're getting punished. They got jacked up relationships with their parents, and they probably like have a lot of overpowering tactics in the home, but out in the world, they are like double bird. I'll do what I want with my helmet, with my e-bike, with my behavior at the Friday night party. And so we just have to trust that giving kids more power when they're strong-willed kids is a science, because of course we're going to stick to the firm boundaries, but it is smart, powerful parenting.
That's good. I'm going to steal firm and kind.
Good. Do it.
No, it's a good mix. The thing that I wrote down just when you said that was, it's something I've been thinking about, and I wanted to ask you about it, is because we get a lot of like, well, kids just need to be obedient. And I was like, for your viewers and people who don't know us, like our son's 30, so he's kind of grown. And Casey was never an obedient child. He never said like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. He's a very responsible kid. So I'm going to do a podcast sometime of the difference between, do I want an obedient child who just does what I want him to do? And look, as a parent, half the stuff I ask for is fairly arbitrary, especially when you're, right, as a young parent, you're just like, I just want them to be quiet, right? It has nothing to do with training them. Just shut up. You guys are loud and annoying. Pick up your stuff and do everything because you're inconvenient. And so my son, when we started this shift, I didn't want him to be an obedient kid. I wanted to raise him to be a responsible young man, which he is. And there's a little shift there from someone who just follows directions really well to someone who does the right thing. And when I see him, like he works with Celebrate Calm. So if you ever reach out to us, you'll deal with Casey, and he'll be awesome for you because you're not his parent. But he took a side job for a catering company. Within 3 months, he got promoted to being shift leader. And a couple months later, he's now general manager. He does full time with me. They hired him to be general manager of the biggest catering company in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And it's because he's that take charge guy. So he's not obedient, but man, you give him something to do and you give him a little space to operate in. And what his boss knows is Casey takes care of it and I don't have to worry about it. And I always joke too that he's really good with conflict. So he's got this catering gig today with like 100 politicians from Alabama. So you know what that's going to be like. No offense, Southerners. We used to live there too. But he said they're very demanding. Casey is really good at conflict because he caused so much as a kid. I'm kidding, but not. So that whole idea of the obedience versus being responsible, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you want to riff on that a little bit, your thoughts kind of on that balance, I'd love to hear.
I will riff and I will borrow that because that is beautiful, Kirk. And it's so true. That's, strong-willed kids are unique and they're different, and they're often are very similar. And what you're describing is so Stella. Like, I joke that, she's 16 and she's an older kid. So her birthday's in November. So you know, I have a feeling like she's on track to get a beach volleyball scholarship. Hopefully that's her desire. I could see her moving to New York City as a 17-year-old because she won't turn 18 until whatever. But like she could just leave tomorrow and totally handle life. Like she is a straight A student, but not because we've ever forced it. Like she just has this desire. Like she can't stand to be second. If she's like, she wants to be here, right? Like, but I can see how the work that we do, the tools that like God's blessed us with that we now get to teach, but that we've raised her with for 13 years, they've allowed her just to thrive as that human being. So the more pressure we put on her, the more problems she has. The less pressure and the more empowerment, education, like the more, like teaching her how to be responsible, like trusting that she wants to be, and then teaching her how to be, helping her like learn from her mistakes without shame or punishment. That's all allowed her to be who she is. So she's the one who like just goes for what she wants, right? Like she just is that person. So it's cool to see how they really do thrive when they are raised with this stuff. And gosh, the idea of responsible versus obedient is just amazing. And yeah, and that's just, you're gonna see your kids, their souls relax and they'll cooperate a whole lot more if your intention just shifts to teaching them how to versus like the stop it. Like, here, I know you want to do well in school. You want to like, and some of them don't, of course. Some of them are just like, no, I really do. I just want to play sports and become really good at that. So again, every child is unique, but if you trust them that like they are usually very smart, driven souls, and you come beside them and stop trying to force or pressure. Like Stella knows, she'll say to us, Mom, I feel you pressuring me on this and it's just not working for me. Like it's not going to work. Right. And I'm like, all right, let me just slow down and think about how I can express to you why this is so important to me and really ask for what I want versus like pressure you to do it. So that's a really cool thought, is the responsible versus obedient, or whatever other word you used.
You know, one of the phrases I learned with Casey and with the kids we worked with was, as they got to the teenage years, was, hey, you know, something I found in life is it tends to go better when I do X. And then I'd walk out of the room. Now
Yeah.
I'm context, and then I'm letting them own it, absorb it. But if I everybody knows this, if you stand over a strong-willed child and try to convince them of something, they're just going to do the opposite. Look, I'm 57. I do the same thing. If I go to some of all one people who are liberal, I'll just be conservative. And if they're all conservative, I'll be liberal because it's boring. I just want to do the opposite. It's more fun. And so when I do that of like, hey, Case, here's something I found. Now it's more about me than, you really need to think about your choices. Because no kids are ever like, you know what, Dad, thanks so much for your wisdom. Now I think, right? So I plant a seed of wisdom, something to think about. Then I remove myself so they have time and space a little bit. And I don't know if you found this with your daughter, but space is really important. Like giving them space rather than standing over them. So if that means anything to you, talk about that a little bit, or if there's something else. Top of mind, just roll with it.
It does. Yeah. Stella is the queen of like space, man. She's such a unique kid. She slept in her own bed from the first night she got home from the hospital. She like did not want to be in that little thing next to my bed. It was crazy. We were like, wow, we just cried all night and we put her to bed in her own little thing, and she just like she just went to bed and slept from the bed on her own. is someone who really does need space. And again, if she feels pressure or you trying to make her believe something or do something or lecture her, you'll just lose her. She's not engaged. The connection, you lose the connection. As soon as you lose the connection with her, you become less influential and effective as a parent, right? As a firm, kind leader, as an educator. Like, I believe we're all teachers in our homes, and we do have to change the way we teach when we have these type of schools and on to make that one or two strong-willed kid in your class that's 4 years old behave the same way in the same way. But trust me, if you just adapt a little bit, you're going to have an easier time. But I love that, Kirk. And so one of the things that I found is really important too is you're so right. You drop the nugget of wisdom in that way, right? And if you can relate it to storytelling, like you said, you'll often engage them more. Their ears stay open.
Yeah.
I like when I was 13, I struggled, like I had these thoughts too, or I remember thinking this, or the way you said is so beautiful too. And then the biggest thing is the mistakes. Like like strong-willed kids, they're just the doers. They are like, they're significance kids, right? So like, we can tell them, but honestly, they learn best when they experience it often and they then like believe it. And then often I find that that's when they take your nugget of wisdom and they're like, hey, mom, you were right. Like, thank you for teaching me that. Or now I see it, right? But with Stella, it's been like, I can't imagine what it would have been like for the last 13 years if we were using punishment versus discipline with her, because mistakes always became opportunities to learn. And that is what allowed her to become the person she is today, where she's not perfect. We're not expect her to be a perfect life, but to this day, when there's mistakes that happen, we work through it as a family. We try our best not to bring shame into the picture. We relate to her. We actually use her mistakes as like guidance for where we need to clean up our own lives. Like, it's happened pretty significantly the last 2 years of like, dang, okay, God, I see what you're pointing out. The life skill is not here. So that's been amazing. But the whole idea that the wisdom that we drop, we like, the more we can become comfortable with these kids are going to mess up. They are going to make mistakes. And if you can teach them how to learn from those mistakes and then tie it together with the wisdom that you are embarking in, what is that word I'm looking for? That you're like placing in your children along the way, and they can tie those together, then you're going to see the long-term results really come into play, because it's not, they're just not always the kids who take it right in that moment. They
Right.
need the space, and then they need the real life application. And we always joke that if, like with Stella, if it's her, like she won't do anything pretty much unless it's her idea.
Right.
So if you've dropped wisdom, maybe she's made a mistake and realized like, oh, actually this is important. Like I should like make this a thing to like pick up my towels or something. That's when her habits will change, you know. But if you're telling her that you got to do this, like you just lose her.
Right. So here's a question for that's hard for parents, and the reason I think why we kind of lecture and we do that. For me, it usually comes down to anxiety, because I'm anxious about my child's future. If my child's not doing this and isn't doing their hardest at school and isn't applying themselves, then they're not going to be successful in life, right? We project out with our, from the time kids are 4, right? Which is if they can't do preschool well, which your strong-willed kids, you're going to get the call from the school. It's just going to happen. I'd be disappointed if your 4-year-old didn't push the limit. That's their job at 4 and 5, right? Their job is to make messes and explore. I don't want a 5-year-old standing perfectly in line and doing it. Like, I don't want that. That's actually not healthy. But anyway, so there's that part. And then there's our own control issues, right? Like, I know the way I want it done. And if you do it the way I do it, it's more effective and efficient, and we'll get it done more quickly. And they don't really care. So can you speak to, did either of those come into play in your own kind of journey? I hate that word, but it's whatever. But in your own parenting journey, the anxiety or the control issues or both, how do you see that playing out with parents or even yourself?
Yes, 1000%. You know, I've been doing this for 13 years and I'm just now really starting to see like how much anxiety shows up for me. And it's interesting. I'm starting to use that word a little bit more, but I just look at like the fear, right? Because I see anxiety and fear being like cousins and related. And we do so much like base emotion work that fear is the one that I see and that I am most likely to like be like, oh, I see you here. We're hanging out, right? And so I love to like, and so thinking back, so to answer this question, thinking back to that season, um, it was always fear, right? When I would get like triggered, or like I think of a time when my kids always fought. Like I had two kids and they've always been one strong-willed one easygoing one, but the easygoing one also he doesn't, thank God, he's got like a good backbone. He doesn't just take stuff. And so sibling conflict for years and years was really intense. And I remember a time when like I was handling myself well until I looked over. I was in a field picking flowers at our farmer's house. And I looked over and there was like this couple in the far corner of the field that had come out of their house. And they were standing there with and my kids literally had like sticks. They were like fighting with sticks. And I was so proud of myself because I was like, I'm letting them work this out. Like I teach them peaceful conflict resolution. And this is a safe place for them to practice how to fight without hurting each other. But they had sticks. And I just remember looking over, and that is when I flew off the handle. It wasn't when my kids were fighting with sticks. It was when I saw the people and I was scared. Like in the moment, I didn't think about it like this, but really after I got through the trigger, I freaked out. I actually, probably one of the worst times I've ever yelled at Stella, like literally kicked her out of the car for drum lessons. I was scared of judgment. I was scared that this random stranger couple was judging me. And then it turned internal to like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a bad job. And still at that season, I was still probably a little bit like, what if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid?
Right.
So the fear was still there, you know? And so over the years, I've just learned to know that this is the feeling of scared. And on the other side of scared is courage and bravery. And if you're going to be a parent who builds a legacy of your dreams and is really someone that does stuff different, which, man, I know you feel this too, Kirk, that it's just the best feeling in the world when you look at your family and you're like, we are healthy. And yes, we're not perfect, but we have such healthy, emotional, literate relationships. We have the ability to have conflict resolution. Like, it's just good. It's the best feeling. And like, if you're going to be someone who does that, you're going to want to get comfortable with feeling scared and not panicking, but just knowing it's just an emotion. And once you move through that, instead of suppress or deny or hide, but like really bring attention to it and just realize like on the other side is the ability to know like how brave it was, how courageous it was to be different. Like at your church when everyone is like, no, you're like you are in a cult or you are whatever. And you're like, actually, no, I'm scared of your judgment. I'm scared that sometimes it's not going to work. And I'm still going to go. I'm still going to trust my intuition or my heart or what my body is telling me, that this doesn't make sense for me to teach my children not to hit and then hit them. Like just innate wisdom. I'm going to trust it, even though I'm scared of all these things. I'm scared of my kids hitting or hurting each other. I'm scared of people judging me. I'm scared of getting it wrong. I'm scared of raising entitled maniacs. And I'm just going to do it anyways and move through that emotion of fear. And that's when you get to celebrate the bravery and courage, which is, I think, one of the coolest emotions and feelings in this human experience that we have. I mean, bravery and courage is like, yes, especially for those of us who have a bit of a strong will and a huge desire to feel powerful. Like when you stand in bravery and courage, you're like, it's a pretty powerful feeling.
That is really cool. I think the other part for me was trusting what I learned in life and being able to take the long-term view of like, look, this stuff that you're trying to get my son to do is pretty much arbitrary, right? Like circle time, he doesn't do circle time when he's 30. Nobody does that. So there is that really, then that takes courage to say, You know, we're not going to do those arbitrary things because they just don't matter. I'm going to focus on the right things. And then I was going to end it with, because we have the holidays coming up. So I did this Thanksgiving podcast and, you know, how to deal with family. But I threw in some snarky stuff, right? When your sister comes and she's like, oh, you know, you really need to discipline your son, or they brag about their child. And I'm not encouraging people to do this, but it is fun to say, like, if they come and say, oh, your daughter, so you still value that just obedience to things you say, like, and she's so compliant, you know, she's so compliant. How quaint is that? I don't know how she's going to operate in the real world like that, because she's probably going to marry a controlling man like you did. But we really love art. I'm kidding. But I don't want people to feel defensive over it and say, because one of the main things with family is being confident, because you get surrounded by a whole group who's looking at your, you know, you've got all these kids at the holidays and your child is the one who is always acting up. Well, you just need to discipline him. You just do it. And so I try to set my child up for success during the holidays. So when we're going to it's like, hey, Grandpa, could you give your grandson a job to do because he loves tinkering with things, working with things? So I like kids up for success, and I like being confident saying, no, I'm not raising a child. I'm raising an adult. My son isn't that good as a kid. Your child is amazing as a kid. And one day he's probably going to work for my son because my son's poor. And we need compliant rule followers that we can pay very little money to. But anyway.
I love Kirk. It's so true.
Well, it's fun to do in your head sometimes. You don't always have the courage. And I wasn't like snarky with my family, but I did over time say, oh, you know what a good one is to say, hey, let's have a discussion. There's a lot of wisdom in this room. What are the qualities necessary for success in the real world? Hey, Mr. Doctor over there, hey, teacher, hey, this in our family, what got you to that point? And they'll list off all their qualities and you'll say, like, you just described my strong-willed son. He's just not good at coming into a room and hugging his grandma because she smells a little bit, and he have the social graces. But man, you put that kid out in the real world, my son's going to crush it. And so as we go into kind of holidays when you're around family or just the unscheduled part of that time, any tools that you would give parents for handling kind of that time around family or the disorganized time?
Oh, I love all that. And I can see myself, again, just borrowing your wisdom, Kirk, of like sharing with my community, the idea of saying, so you guys are still trying to make that model work. Like, that's an honest question. Like, so you're still doing punishment and stuff like that. And how's it going? Right? Like, how's it going? How's it feeling during like that? I like that. I could kind of go in that direction as a way to, because this is a big thing, right? Like, it is like you go to your sister-in-law's house or your cousin's house and it is tense for parents. So I always, some of my tips I like to say is just remember that it's easier to handle things the way you want to when you remove yourself from the fishbowl. So like when there is the behavior stuff, which there will be with our beautiful, strong-willed children, like taking a car ride or like taking a walk, right? Like putting them in the stroller and just saying, hey, I would like to say to these kids, especially because a lot of them are like, a lot of my community is doing a 180. So they find me once they've been punishing, hitting, shaming, humiliating, and intimidating for years. And then they come and they're like, oh, now we're going to switch. But yet their children still retreat or resist, you know? So I like to use the term like, hey, you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. And we need to take a walk. We need to go for a quick car ride, right? Or like, or
you say like, look, I don't like your cousins either. These people are, I'm kidding. But no, I think that's important for them. And I do believe in this. We did it all the time of if like, because you always have one family member, relative that's kind of a control freak with the meal. And then their spouse forgot something from the store. So I was always like, I'll go. And it would take me like 3 hours. And sometimes the store was closed, but it didn't matter because I'm going. And then I would just take Casey and I'd be like, hey, let's go. And we'll grab something fun. That's everybody. don't worry. Look, you're going to be judged anyway. Well, why do you guys always disappear? Maybe because you're judgmental and we don't really like being around you, right? Like that's probably why. You can't always say that, but just courage to do, this might be good. Have the courage to do what's best for your family. And that takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, this is my kid. I know my kid, and this is just the way it works best. So anyway, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
And I love it, just the confidence, like shoulders back, and just know that when you leave, just do some journaling and get the support you need to process all the underlying stuff that has you in knots when they say the stuff, right? Like we do a lot of that inside of our community. It's like, let's work on that, because that not feeling, or the stuff that makes you fight, which is like the defensiveness or the attack back, or the freeze, which is like, I don't know, we're just drinking the Kool-Aid, like all of that stuff. Like, let's make sure we attend to that in a loving way later. So then the next family gathering, next Christmas, you'll be a little bit more confident, right? Because a lot of people, like, we all want to be confident with our shoulders back and like, hey, we're just going to take a ride. Like, it's so good. It's so true. And just know that it's normal if you're not there yet, and just make sure you come back and tend to it, because there's so much power in realizing, like, wow, I was really triggered when my sister-in-law said that. Why do I feel so freaking unconfident to say, this is what's right for our family? Why can that not come out of my mouth, right? Like, let's look at it, and we'll learn, we'll grow, we'll heal. Because that's really how this really works in the long term, right, Kirk? I mean, like, we make little steps, and then 1 year later you realize, like, whoa, we've grown a lot, right? Like, me as a parent, you as a kid, and then the next year you grow more and more, and by the time they're older, you're like, dang, we've built a pretty beautiful family legacy. So
hey, can I add something else that I encourage families to do? Is, so I did go through this Thanksgiving thing where it's like the strong-willed child doesn't want to sit at the table and eat the turkey and all the stuff. And so beforehand, he's like, Mom, Dad, do I have to do this? And Mom's like, you know what? I'll just give you mac and cheese, because they eat that all the time. Mac and cheese, chicken nuggets at 3 o'clock. You don't have to sit at the big family table while Uncle Frank talks about politics and everybody else's whatever. Well, then your family starts, well, why isn't your son sitting at the Thanksgiving table? We often sit at the table. And what often happens, and this is what I want to get to, is if husband and wife aren't on the same page. Now, Dad doesn't want to appear weak. That would be me, right? So he's like, so then he's like, son, you're going to sit at the table like everybody else. And then that go to Mom and say, Mom, you said I could have mac and cheese, that I didn't have to do this. And then there's this, everybody's watching, because now Dad doesn't want to appear weak in front of all the uncles, right? You're going to give in, let your son eat at 3 o'clock without the family. Yeah. So getting on the same page is huge to me. So if my assumption is most of the time it's mainly moms on listening to podcasts and doing things. I'd encourage your husbands, go through Wendy's materials and listen to her show, listen to our podcast. I do a lot of stuff for men because I'm a guy, and so I got the men at times and a little bit more forcefully and succinctly, the way we like it. But can you speak, as we kind of close up, speak to that dynamic between the husband and wife getting on the same page with a strong-willed child? Woo! That next time, because that's like an hour-long thing. But
I know, right?
Any tips?
So real quick before I answer, so did you say most of your listenership is women?
I would say, you know what, it's surprising. I always thought it was about 80 to 90% women, but it's actually, the latest stats we had, I have a fair amount of men, but I think it's partly because I'm a guy too.
Yeah, I would think that we would have way more guys.
I don't know. They don't listen all the way through. It's a struggle for women to get like, hey, so if I do a podcast just for men, like 3 things your wife can't tell you, but she wants to, I try to make it like 7 minutes long, because you guys look, I'm busy. You're not too busy for 7 minutes.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, but or maybe it's the engagement tends to be, I always make the joke of, like, I've done this for 20 years. Every email that comes at midnight is from a mom. I'm at my wit's end. I've never gotten an email at midnight from a man who's like, I'm up all night, I can't sleep because of my kid. It's not that we don't care. It's just that we fall asleep, we forget we have children. And but women never forget. But the engagement tends to be, women tend to be moms tend to be very, very engaged with these materials. And it's kind of dragging husband along to try to
Yeah.
get forward. And I try to encourage moms, like, just give your husband like one thing to, honey, when you come home from work tonight, try this, just one thing. Because if you go and be like, we've got to change our entire parenting paradigm, he's gonna be like, I'm out. It's too much
Yeah.
for me. So any wisdom in helping wives with husbands or parents get on the same page?
Yep. So that is so interesting. Asking for what you want versus pressure is always a good idea, right? Like the pressuring or passive aggressive or like, you really should listen to this. Like if
Uh-huh.
you listened, then you would know that actually punishment makes it worse with him. Like any type of pressure or blame, kind of shame tactics, all that kind of stuff, it won't work, right? So I just advocate for ask for what you want and let them know like what you're doing and where you're seeing success. So say if your spouse is at work all day and you're like, babe, I got to share this with you. It's crazy. I was thinking like this, he was driving me nuts and he wouldn't stop asking for the freaking Pop-Tart. And then I tried that thing. I told you I've been listening to Kirk's podcast and Wendy's podcast, and I tried that thing and it was insane. It like, I saw him shift so fast. So, you know, would you be willing to try it tomorrow or this weekend when I go get my hair done? Would you be willing to try that next time you get in that power struggle? Because it really worked. Like he turned around and like ate the apple and it was fantastic. So sharing in the successes, going first, like I just think it's the best way in parenting and marriage. Like you just, if something is important to you and you're feeling off, like if you're threatening, if you're punishing, if you're tied up in knots all day of stress because you can't stand your kid, trust me, been there for a season, like you got to get yourself the help first, where you have the courage and the confidence to educate, to walk into education, right? Like whether that's with Fresh Start Family or through consulting with you, Kirk, like get yourself supported and ask them if they'll join you. And if they don't, then you go first, right? And then when you start to see and experience the beauty of what it looks like to get your kids to cooperate better with connection versus fear and force, they will be watching, right? And I know like we just do this so much in our work because like it's just thick, like it is thick and it is intense to have mom and dad on different teams or different pages, so to speak. But I just find that if you respect them and you say, hey, I get it, like, and not pressure, but here's what I'm doing, I'm finding value in investing this money, right? Like I'd like to request this part of the tax return, or for Christmas, I always say for Christmas, holiday gift, your birthday, Mother's Day, like it's a great time to say, hey, I would love like just a private session or education or whatever, a course from this person or that person, over any sweaters or candles from the kids. So if you are going to get me anything, this is really what's on my list. What I really hope for and would love more than anything is for us to really be on the same page and to have some of the same tools to be doing this together. That type of delivery, I think, gets us farther than any type of like snarkiness. And I love your snarkiness. Like your snarkiness is amazing, Kirk. But when it comes to this like pressure stuff, like they it seems like they respond a whole lot more if we just invite them in. So
Good. I'm going to do a podcast after the new year on how to talk to men, because we tend to be more direct. I like assertive. Tell me what you need, make it specific. With men, a lot of times analogies. Hey, honey, I've noticed at work when you're having a problem with one of your employees, you handle it this way and you're amazing at it. And so try that. Could you try that with your son next time? Or, hey, I noticed that quarterback, man, he's unflappable. His team follows him because he doesn't, things are going wrong. Can we, and I like what you said of like, I like doing, could we try this for the next week? Right? Like, clearly what we're doing isn't working, right? So, because I don't like generalities with men of like, we need to change everything where it's too big. But if it's one specific thing, so I had a dad the other day, and it was one of the best calls ever, because when this couple signed up for consultation, I read my little intake form. I was like, man, that's not going to work. This guy's like hardcore. And to this guy's credit, I hit him pretty hard because I'm tough with guys because I'm a guy.
Yeah.
I said, dude, you can't do this. I said, one, you're going to lose a relationship with your daughter. And two, then you're going to lose a relationship with your wife because she doesn't respect you right now because you can't control yourself. And she's got to walk around maybe of a 7-year-old and a 47-year-old. It's not going to work. And I got on the phone the other day. It was a follow-up call, and I was like, oh. And his daughter was freaking out in the kitchen. He sat down and he started eating a snack, and he didn't react to her. And she would look over to see, and he just stayed calm, and he just looked at her and he said, you know what? Looks like you're frustrated. You know how I know that? Because I get frustrated too, and that's how I usually act. And I was like, tears in my eyes, like, that family just changed because that dude did one simple thing. And it was really, so anyway, I love what you say about that. So we've got to kind of wrap up here, but this is awesome. This is my first time doing this. I may actually do it again, but probably not because I hate it. No, I've done it, so this is kind of fun. And I don't have to get dressed up. I used to wear like a fake shirt and I'd have on shorts, but I'm on now. So how do people, Wendy, I will link to your stuff on the Facebook page and our materials, but how do people find you? Give us a website, podcast, email address, phone number, whatever you want to give out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirk. If anyone's watching right now or watches the replay, so I will make sure I repost this on my Instagram. I'll also share it with my email list because I just love you, Kirk. I am so thankful. I feel like I call you a friend because I just want to hang out with you more. Like if you're ever in San Diego, please call me because we need to go for a hike or something because I just really admire you and have fun with you. And my daughter can play the drums for you and she can play Metallica and blow your mind.
Lars.
Share all this too.
She's like a little Lars in Metallica. When you said before of like going to drum practice, I was like, figures. Yeah. The strong little child not going to be playing like anyway. That's all.
No. So Instagram, we're here, Fresh Start Wendy. I've got free resources that I would love to get into your hands. And all you have to do is DM me a word. So one of them is a strong-willed kid quick start learning bundle, comes with a free learning guide, comes with a free workshop. Just DM me the word freedom. You can put it in the comments right now, or you can DM me the word freedom. And then come find us on the Fresh Start Family Show. As I said, Kirk was on episode 155 of the Fresh Start Family Show, and we had such a good conversation. And that's kind of the best place to find me. So thank you for asking, Kirk. Thank you for having me today. This has been really fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we'll come see your drummer girl. And maybe Casey will bring his guitar and they can do some Metallica together. That would be awesome. So, hey, thank you everybody for joining. And if Wendy or if I can help you in any way, that's kind of what we exist to do. So don't DM me because I have no idea what that means. But you can, it'll be sitting there. I'm just learning Instagram a little bit. Awesome. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.